and welcome to the Mandatory Social Interaction Show. I'm your host, Eric, along with my feline-loving co-host, Ben.
I can't argue with that.
And our other co-host, Tim, is on assignment this week. He should be back next week, but I think Ben is gone next week, so it's gonna be me and one other host for the next couple of weeks here. But that's cool.
A little bit of juggling, but that's how it goes.
We can hold down the fort. It'll be fine.
Here, now I'm centered.
So
yes. So it's been a crazy week for me. A lot of stuff has been going on, and I think a lot of stuff's been going on for you too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been it has been a nutso week. Had lots of things happening. So let's see. Couple of things we can talk about. First thing is I went to a show last night. Saw the Suburbs downtown in Minneapolis. That was a super cool show. A lot of fun. And I know, Ben, you've been working really hard at some of the art things going on around town. I realize this is local news. We'll get on with non-local stuff in a few minutes, but I know
there is an art gathering in Minneapolis called Art-a-whirl that happens basically in all of like the northeast sector of Minneapolis, where a bunch of buildings open up their galleries and a bunch of artists kind of come out and show their stuff and have booths. And my wife is there, so that is where I'm going immediately after this.
And actually, I was near you last night because I was at 612 Brewing, which wasn't far from some of the other Art-a-whirl stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there was a fun time out there at 612. They were doing like bands all night, like different, like a band an hour essentially for like 5 hours.
Yeah, it's
over
crazy.
There. Yeah, it was nuts. It was actually super cool. I didn't have a chance to talk to you really before the show, but I was wondering, did Sam Perkins make it out to you?
He did. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to see him outside of the work environment.
Cool.
And get everything there too. I met his girlfriend again, who's super nice.
Yeah.
And I think they bought some buttons from us, which was also pretty cool.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
So let's get into some of the meat of the show here. So one thing, I was asking the chat while we were trying to get our technical issues sorted out, what they would want to talk about. And one of the interesting questions was, have you ever used SunVox for music production? And kind of what do you think of it? So I was talking to them earlier, but I'm going to reiterate for the show. I have not used SunVox, but I've seen it used. I've actually watched a couple of the 2-hour album challenge streams where people have used SunVox as their DAW of choice. I think it's really cool. I do like the kind of modular nature of how you put together instruments and sounds and stuff. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
The thing that kind of turns me off about it a little bit is the tracker interface. I've used trackers before, and I have a hard time with that interface. Not gonna lie. It's cool, and I get what's going on, but at the same time, it doesn't resonate with me. The one that the DAW that really resonates with me is like Ableton and or Bitwig, because they use more or less the same interface.
And I agree with that, but I also think that a different interface can be really valuable. I mean, one of the reasons why I like FemiTracker so much is that the interface is so different that it forces me to work in a different way. And I haven't used SunVox myself. That's something that I kind of wanted to try just because it looks so unique. But yeah, like the whole interface thing is definitely a big shift. But sometimes it can really change the way that you approach and solve problems too.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something. I mean, that is something I've noticed in other tools, is how you solve problems is like. I mean, one of the reasons I resonate with like Ableton and Bitwig is that the interface kind of matches the way I solve problems or the way I think about music. And it's that really is something that, like, when I first started using Ableton, I was just like hooked, because it was exactly what it was like, oh wow, you mean I can make little snippets and then put them all together and like this becomes a thing. and I can kind of perform it, like, whoa, this is huge. This is like so much more the way I think about music, because I tend to think about music in terms of phrases and snippets and, like, 2 bars or 4 bars or 8 bars. Matter of fact, like, living in the arrangement view is something that's kind of new to me, and I'm getting better at it, but it's for a long time I only lived in, what is that called, the session view, where you just have where you're just building clips in the clip launcher.
That's the live view, I think.
Whatever,
or maybe it is session view.
I'm not sure I don't remember what they call it, but essentially the clip launcher view. And I would just add, create clips inside there, and then I would write pieces, or finish a piece basically by performing it, launching clips. And that was something that I really resonated with. But I wonder if I think SunVox is also Linux available, or
Yes,
for Linux. So maybe I'll grab it and give it a shot. I know several people use it on the 2-hour album channel. Man, I can't say that today. Album challenge. And to answer your question, John Prestone, yes, I have tried Reaper. I do like Reaper, although I don't resonate with Reaper's MIDI stuff. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. I have written music in Reaper, and I didn't hate it, but I also am not, like, super in love with it, but I've used it for, like, mix downs and stuff like that. SunVox, or I should say Reaper, I don't think is available on Linux, Saphira.
No, I don't believe it is either. But that's another one that I've wanted to try, just because it's like a whole workflow thing. I really was, like, sold on FL Studio, and it took a lot of doing from one of my friends to get me to try Ableton. And when I did, I was like, I don't get this. And then after a week of messing around with it, it's like, oh, I get this. This works way better for me. And it's all a personal preference thing too.
Yeah. Oh no, go for it.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, all DAWs kind of do the same thing. It's just the way that they execute that stuff. So it's important to just find one that works for you, and that's really all that you need to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. I tried FL Studio as well, and I had a hard time getting a hang of the interface. And it's funny because when you find that thing that works for you, it just clicks. I mean, that was what happened with me with Ableton. It was like, boom. I saw Ableton in some YouTube videos or whatever, and I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And when I got it, I was, like, hooked immediately, because it was, I think I spent an hour in it, and I was creating, and I was like, wow, this is super cool. And then, I started doing things with Ableton like clips that weren't 4/4, clips that were an odd number of beats long, and doing things like that. Which, speaking of, I need to do some of that again, because I haven't done that stuff in a long time. Everything I've done recently has been pretty 4 on the floor. But that was one of the cool things about it too. I really liked was, like, hey, here's this clip interface, but also it's super flexible. So you can, if you want to make a 7-beat long clip, you can. You can also work in 7/4, or you can, you can just make clips that are odd numbers long, and then let them, polyrhythm against each other and do all kinds of really cool things. And that's something I really liked. And that's like the tracker interface, for instance, getting back to SunVox. I don't know how I would do that.
It's a lot more work. Like, I'm only familiar with FamiTracker, which is a similar, trackers have a similar interface. It's more of a grid-based thing. And doing polyrhythmic stuff is a lot harder, because your loops are all kind of consolidated into the same box. But it's still doable. It just takes a little bit more work.
Can you make patterns of different lengths, or are all patterns the same length in... Now, I know you're talking about FamiTracker. and I'm going to extrapolate that to SunVox. But
Yeah.
I know the tracker format used to. I think you were defining patterns in terms of step length.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
I
and
don't
you
know
can-
if that was adjustable.
Yeah, you can do that. At least I'm talking in FamiTracker, but I would assume that in SunVox something similar you could do, where it's like either you just determine that each pattern is a certain number of beats or a certain number of subdivisions of beats, and then and then you can either limit those per pattern or you can like bounce between them and stuff. So there's a lot of yeah. Sophia knows more than I do.
Can you? Yeah, and the other question I would have is, can you lay patterns on top of each other?
That I don't know.
You know, so
with FamiTracker, that's a lot of copy pasting.
Gotcha.
in
Okay.
awkward places. I'm gonna turn that down.
Fair enough.
I was warm earlier, and now I'm not.
So, well, cool. That's some good stuff. Ben, did you have what did you have to talk about this week?
Honestly, I don't have anything. I've been running around so much. I mean, it's time management is a really big thing. Another thing that I could talk about is low-key collaborations with people. I did an interview with Jeremy from Red Greens Recording last weekend, and that was a lot of fun. And it's just like, it's one of those things where it's a little bit of everybody kind of knows who Jeremy is, but you know, they might know who I am, or if somebody isn't familiar with Jeremy, then they will be, because his channel is definitely worth checking out. And like being able to collaborate with people, not necessarily in like a direct project, but just working together and having a adjacency is really valuable. And I mean, we could talk about that if you wanted, even though I kind of just said everything I was going to say about it.
No, I totally get that. And some, you know, actually this could go back into some other creative topics that I was thinking about. And so first of all, yeah, absolutely. Collaborations are super important for anything you're doing. If you're streaming, if you're making music, whatever it is, collaborations, even if you're not collaborating on the thing that you do, you know, like Ben is talking about, you know, he's not making music with Jeremy, he's doing an interview. You know, for instance, you know, this is a collaboration between Ben and Tim and myself. And you know, we're not doing the thing that we're doing really. Like Tim is a game streamer. We're not playing games. Ben makes music and does music streams. We're not making music. You know, I make music, and this, you know, I mean, this is one of the bigger things that I do is this show. You know, and
for now,
yeah, absolutely. It's not that it's not that I don't want to do more stuff in the future, but for right now, this is kind of the bigger thing that I do, other than put out songs and stuff on YouTube and whatnot. And you know, the thing is, this collaboration is huge. It totally works for us. It's getting it. You know, I've even noticed in the chat, we've got people from Ben's stream. We get people from Tim's community, which is great. Everyone is super cool. And that's one of those things that's like, you know, the collaboration is the reason those communities are coming together. You know, and that's one of the important things. So like creatively, whatever you can do to work with someone else is a really good idea.
Yeah. And it is scary too, because like working with somebody else, you don't always know what you're getting yourself into. And like the lower key collaborations, like a podcast or an interview, or just like even remixing somebody else's song, which is kind of a one-way street. Like, you know about them and they might not know about you, but like investing the time to work with somebody else on their work is really valuable. And like it's intimidating, I think. Like interviewing Jeremy was really intimidating because it's like he has such a huge following. He has such a huge, amazing following, but it's one of those things where it's like, hey Ben, don't screw this up. And you know, thankfully it was a really good talk with him, and he's a super chill guy, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's like it's really hard to not feel intimidated about that stuff. But everybody is just a person. Like they're not some like demigod that requires like respect, or if they are, they're the type of artist that you don't really want to deal with anyway. So yeah, it's super easy to get psyched out by this kind of stuff, but it was so cool to just just work with people. Like I've been working with Garden Sound, who is admittedly a smaller YouTuber, but still a really, really good one. And he puts out some amazing content, and it's been a lot of fun. The stream that I just did was a collaboration with him and Mikey, who is another YouTuber, and like just getting everything together is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a couple of things from the chat here. Like Alien Amethyst is saying they found you from Simon the Magpie, which is I know has participated in the 2-hour album challenge a couple times, or at least once.
Yes, the first one. Yeah, I don't think he made it to the second one.
Yeah, and like Sophira is talking about following Twitch raids and saying that mostly only the game streams do that. But like actually one of the things we planned, Sophira, when we decided we were going to start a mandatory social interaction show again, was to do it right after Ben's stream on Saturday, literally so we could raid. Because, one of the things we wanted was interaction with chat just like this. And we love talking to the chat. We love having you guys here. It's one of the reasons we do this. It was like, hey, if we do this directly following Ben's stream, it works out really well for everyone. It means that Ben can get his streaming and the podcast all done in one block, so he's done with whatever he needs to do by the end of the show, basically. And then from the stream point of view, it's like, yeah, we get the audience over here from Ben's stream, and it's there's a lot of cross pollination because Ben's audience is probably going to be interested in what we talk about here. And that's. Oh, go for it, Ben. I'm sorry. No,
I was just gonna say that like Twitch raids for that are so valuable exactly for that, because you're often going to go raid somebody whose content you appreciate or like, and then it's just pushing people to somebody that this is somebody that I like, so probably you'll like it too. And I really like the idea of raiding. I need to find more people on Twitch who do that. Or who like make the content that I like. I'm notoriously bad at at helping other people out on Twitch, and it's a community thing that I need to get better at.
Yeah, and I mean and part of that is going to be one thing I think as a creative person you kind of need to keep an eye on is other streamers, other people, and see what they're doing. Not to be competitive, but to be aware of other people that do what you do, like a good example is Garden Sound or Red Means Recording, where there is kind of this great little echo chamber. And I know echo chamber is typically used in a pejorative way, but it's not necessarily. I'm sorry, M. Nightbot is being a dick today, and I will take care of Nightbot after the stream. I'm just going to remove Nightbot, and I'm sorry. You are the second person. You are the second person to get slapped by Nightbot, and that sucks. So I'm going to take Nightbot out, and we'll see how it goes. So I'm really sorry. Anyway, one of the things is there's this great little kind of echo chamber between like Garden Sound and yourself and Red Means Recording, where everyone is kind of inspiring the other people.
Exactly.
Red Means Recording has had, for a long time did kind of a particular type of video format, and then, other people in the community started kind of emulating it because it was so good. And that was really cool. Like, there's nothing wrong, and that's something that's interesting is, there's nothing wrong with kind of stealing an idea. Because odds are you're going to make it your own anyway, unless most people aren't doing direct copies, but most people are looking at something like the way Red Means Recording does a video with the OP1 or with the Pocket Operators. It's like, hey, here's kind of how they're put together. This is a great way to, demo these things, or to, there's a great, it's a great format, and it doesn't mean you have to do it all the time. But but seriously, it's really interesting watching the community kind of grow in itself.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. It's like it's super cool to be a part of this. Like, even if I'm a very small part of it, but just trying to work on, growing my little part of the community and helping other people experience garden sound, and Simon the Magpie, and I'm gonna start looking at Mikey's videos too, because she seems to do some really cool stuff. And yeah, there's so much stuff out there, and creating that echo chamber, especially, I mean, it does sound like it's a pejorative, but it's not. It's just like you're creating a system where other people can find things that are similar. And I think it's really valuable to keep that, and not create a competition out of it, because creating a competition out of this stuff is how things go poorly.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no need for drama. There's no need for drama in any of this stuff.
Well, and that's one of those things too. It's like, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? I mean, it's not none of like one of the reasons I love your community, and this community here that's developing with the show, is we're all about raising everybody up, right? Like, I had a really good discussion the other night with a couple of people in your Discord about how do you make a song from a snippet? Like, the person had like a 45 or 50-second thing and was like, hey, how do I turn this into a 3-minute song? And we had probably a 20-minute long discussion about, well, here are some strategies. Here are some things to try. And whether they help you specifically or not, and whether you take that advice directly, or you or you take it and do your own thing with it, it doesn't matter, right? The discussion is the important thing. It's that connection in the community. It's not whether someone does the exact thing you told them to do. It's the fact that they asked and you answered a question, because, at the end of the day, it's their creative vision and they have to do what they need to do. But they also now know that there's support in that community. There's people that are going to, like, hey, if I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z, I can't get it right. How do you guys do this? And someone's going to answer. And that's super important.
It is. And it's also important to just let people, make people aware that everybody goes through those problems. And that's why streaming, and why I like watching other people stream, is because you get to watch other people encounter these creative problems and be like, okay, so I've run into this thousands of times. How do you solve it? And like, how do you overcome these problems? And I think streaming in general is really cool for that.
Yeah, totally. And one thing you mentioned earlier that I kind of wanted to touch on too is time management. Because that is something we all struggle with. And Em in the chat is, saying, like, watching your streams and struggles made them comfortable with screwing up, which is awesome. I mean, that's one of the things. And I am the same way. What's funny is in the last 2 weeks, I put out 3 songs. And they're on YouTube. And no, I take that back. I'm sorry. One of them is on YouTube, and the other ones are on SoundCloud and Clip It. And if you're in Ben's Discord, you can probably find the links to them. If not, just hit me up and I'll be happy to send them to you. Either way, my point is, I probably wouldn't have put those things out there. And I could tell you a year ago, 2 years ago, I probably wouldn't have put them out there, or I would have sat on them for months and months. I wouldn't have felt like I had the support, where now I feel like I finish those songs up, and 5 minutes after I'm done, I'm putting them up on SoundCloud and putting a link in the Discord. Hey, this is done. It's good enough. And that's exactly your thing. It's all right, good enough. And I do listen to them and I go, hey, if I'm going to put this on an album, maybe I'm going to make this change or that change. But I put it up and I leave it up. I don't put them up and take them down a week later going, oh, I got to fix it, or I got to do this or that. It's Yeah, no, go for it. Because I mean, it's like huge. It's a huge sea change for me to be able to say, this is this is ready to go. Like no matter how good or bad it is, this is it's as far as I'm going to get it right now, and it's good enough. I'm going to put it out there and see what people think.
Yeah, and I think that being okay with not being perfect is something that I think every artist struggles with. So I think that it's good to have that ability to, and it's definitely a learned ability. It's not something that you just naturally have, because you can be very self-conscious about the things that you make. But just have that ability to be just like, okay, this is good enough for now. I want to get this out there and I want to work on something else, because I feel that iteration is much more valuable than trying to make something perfect. Where you can sit down and make something and then be like, okay, well, this is good, but next time when I do this, and it helps make sure that there is a next time. Next time when I do this, I'm going to do this, and this differently because I don't like it in this song. Like, there's no song that's ever going to, there's no real song that's ever going to be your last song. I mean, unless you die somewhere, which, would be unfortunate. But, yeah, Amethyst, I know. But, it's like, it's so valuable to realize that there is never going to be one quintessential song that you make, or at least not that you do intentionally. There's never going to be one song that you make that like defines you as an artist. It's a slow iterative process that takes, dozens or hundreds of pieces, not necessarily songs, but if you're like a writer or a painter or whatever, you're not going to make one thing perfect and be like, okay, now I'm a master. It takes many times of iterations and just keep working. And the fact that you can be comfortable saying this song is good enough is so important to that process, because then you're not beating yourself up over putting something out that's half finished or anything like that. And like you said, Eric, it's important to know that you can go back to those projects even after they're out. I think for a lot of season 2 for the for the 2-hour track challenge for season 2 for that, I went back and I redid some of those songs, and a lot of those ended up on the album that came out as Creationism, which turned out to be these audio quotes from the Composer Quest podcast, talking about creativity and like living a creative life, which I somewhat regret the name Creationism now. I thought it was going to be kind of a dumb little, creating and creation and all this other stuff, not necessarily the religious context, but just like living creatively and as an ism. But that's an aside. The songs were refined and put into an album that were actually like the done version of the song. And I think that it's important to have, that kind of knowledge that you can always go back to something. If you don't like it, you can always make it better. But it's also important to put stuff down and be like, this is done for now. And like you said, John, art is never finished, only abandoned. And I think that's actually somebody's quote in the Creationism album as well. Somebody mentioned that. I can't remember which song though.
Oh, that's all right. And one thing I wanted to bring up, actually, Sophia brings up some stuff that I think a lot of us feel or have felt in the past. She says, I think it's a she. If it's not, I'm really sorry. I always feel like my stuff isn't very good. And it's also very difficult for me to offer anything at a price other than free, so I've never tried doing that. And also they go on to say, I have a ton of stuff that hasn't been finished. I'd say 90% of my stuff is stuff I haven't finished and have never released. And, that's one of the things that was a hard lesson for me is I do also have a lot of stuff that I've done in the past that I've never released, and some of it really is half finished. Some of it is, a 10-second snippet of something that I went like, well, yeah, it's all right, but I don't know that I want to keep going with it. Something that essentially I saved, but more or less pivoted on. But there's also it's very difficult to it's a hard lesson to learn, but you have to put your mistakes out there.
Yep.
And that's what's really hard. It's really difficult to put your mistakes on display and to put them out there. And like as a big, for instance, that's just sticking out in my mind right now. I know the song that I put out recently, which is oh crap, now I can't think of the name of it. Oh, Sunshine.
Sunshine. Yeah.
Sunshine has a couple of things in it that I know aren't like the greatest. I'm not real happy with the risers in that song. I'm also not super happy with the way some of the sounds came out. A little bit more harsh in the like high end than I wanted to. But you know what? I got to the end of it and I went, my ultimate goal was I'm going to put this out. I started it thinking I want to make something to put out, and I did. And I put it out and I said, "Hey, this is, good enough." And I put it out warts and all. And that doesn't mean when I go back to my ultimate goal of I want to put out another album, so that's what I'm kind of working towards. That doesn't mean I won't go back and maybe tweak it, fix it, change out those risers for something different. Maybe I'll find a way to do the vocoder a little differently, so that it's not quite as harsh. But for right now, it's good enough. It was good enough to put it out there, and it's a matter of putting out, you have to learn and internalize that idea that, you're not defined by perfection. You're kind of defined by your imperfections. If everyone if everyone was perfect, it would be a really boring world.
That's true. And that's exactly what M just said, where imperfections are what give character to the songs. Or I could probably extend that to say give character to the artists who make the songs as well. Where it's so valuable to have those imperfections, to have something that isn't perfect. And even in electronic music, I know this podcast is a lot about electronic music. That's because Tim's not here. Because it's those imperfections, even in electronic music, where everything should be like narrow on the grid all the time. It's good to have those imperfections because it creates interesting things. It creates some things that aren't perfect. And it's so cool to have. Yes, if every pork chop were perfect, we wouldn't have hot dogs. Thank you, John, for the choice Steven Universe quote.
That's fantastic. I'm just gonna start referring to my songs as hot dogs now. So yeah, that's one of those things. Oh, and so
it is. Yeah.
Keeping going with this kind of theme. Something I wanted to talk about is time management and project management. Which is stuff that doesn't get talked about a lot in art. And one of the funny things about it is how important it is. And I'm going to give a quick example. Ben showed me about a year ago a tool called Trello. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It's online, Trello.com. And it's essentially, I don't know how else to put it, and maybe Ben, you may have a better, because you've approached it from a different viewpoint. It's essentially agile development, but for anything you want to use it for. So a Trello board is basically a series of columns where you can, put anything you want in a column, and then you define your columns, and so you can have like, a backlog of things, move something into in progress, and then move it to like, it's a to-do list. You're right, Luke. It's a to-do list, but it's more than just a to-do list.
It is a dynamic to-do list that is in the cloud. I mean, that's probably the most generic way of describing it, but it's a dynamic to-do list that you can modify on any device that you are currently carrying on your person, basically. You can access it on your phone, your desktop, your iPad, or whatever.
But the thing with it is, and the thing that I love about it is, when you set it up, so Ben showed it to me about a year ago, but I didn't really start using it in earnest until recently. And the thing is, it works really well if you have a specific goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a Trello board that's literally called "Let's Make an Album," and yes, it's intentionally spelled that way. It's intentionally grammatically incorrect because it makes me laugh every time I bring it up. And I basically have a backlog where, one thing that I realized when I sat down a couple of weeks ago and decided I really want to make more music, and I have fun every time I do the 2-hour album challenge, and I really want to start working on more stuff. I also realized that the 2-hour album challenge works really well for me because there's a prompt. Mm-hmm. Even though half the time I ignore the prompt, it works really well because of it. Because there's an impetus, like, hey, here's a thing, go make a thing relating to this. And even if it only relates in some tangential way, although the recent one I did a little bit more toward the prompt. But I realized what I need to do is come up with a list of prompts. So I went back through some of my own personal writings and found a bunch of phrases and grabbed my Trello board, populated the backlog with those phrases, and I now have a series of prompts that I can go look at and go, oh, yeah. I could either write a song based on this, or I can start working on something, and then I go look at the prompts and go, what fits? Oh, it's that. And then and now it's like, oh, it's this, like, it either becomes the impetus, like the reason to start, or it becomes the reason to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Because
most definitely.
In the middle, it's like, oh, what fits this thing? Oh, it's that phrase. That phrase is it. So now I start integrating things in from that. And for me, I also made a little column of chord progressions, and I'm like, so I never start with nothing. I never have a blank page because I've always got something going, like, well, here's a bunch of chord progressions. I can try one of those. And maybe I reject all of them and say, well, I need to come up with something different. But either way, I still have a place that I'm looking at and starting with a thing. And it was so cool having it. It's like two different processes. It's like you have this, and that's why I'm getting back to time and project management. It's like you almost have to have these two separate mindsets and do them differently. Like one thing I've heard that people do with music production, and I'm getting more towards, is the idea of separating out, even if you're a solo artist, separating out your process so that there's a writing process, there's like an editing process, there's a mixing process, or like writing, arranging, mixing, and mastering, or however you want to break it up. But basically sitting down and saying, like, not just trying to do everything all at once, but literally sitting down and saying, I'm only going to write, or I'm only going to mix, or I'm only going to master. And that doesn't mean you do that on separate days, but it could just be that, like, right now for this half an hour, this is the writing process. And then the next half an hour is, okay, now I need to arrange it. And then the next half an hour is, it could be more, it doesn't have to be completely inorganic, but it's interesting to me. Oh, my video froze. Really? All right, I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to mess with it right now because we're in the middle of the stream. Fine. We're in the middle of a good conversation. So sorry to everyone on the chat. My video is apparently going to freeze again. So, although instead of me looking like I'm in mid-speech, why don't we just do this?
Well, how about you do that and I'll talk for a second.
Go for it.
So there have been I've read some books, and unfortunately I can't remember the name of them, where people have recommended to basically separate your processes out into that, where you do like production, or you do like the analog stuff like writing things out or sketching or whatever, and then you take a break and then do another part of the session where you might do the actual mastering, or you do the inking, or whatever is necessary. But trying to do everything all at the same time will make nothing happen. And I've definitely come across that problem in the past. And with the 2-hour track challenge, it's been something that I've kind of learned to passively do one thing while I'm listening to something else, and it's a whole multitasking thing. But it's still really important to have that separation of duties, because it can get really confusing, and it's very easily overwhelmed, where it's just like, well, I need to do this, but I also need to do this, and I also need to do this, and then you just don't end up doing anything. So it's multitasking can be kind of the death knell to some creative endeavors sometimes. So it's really important to understand, your limits on all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the other thing you were talking about a little bit earlier, the other thing was the creative prompts. And one of my favorite creative prompts that I ever did was for a song in the Maker's Eden Act 2, I think, soundtrack. The song was just supposed to be some kind of low-key, somewhat cinematic kind of thing. And what I did was I actually went to YouTube and I grabbed like a 10-minute log video of somebody playing a zombie game, like one of the creeping along zombie games, not like an action game. And I basically made a soundtrack to that video, where if things got actiony, I made the song actiony, and when things got chill, I made it chill. And like the video was never like associated with the song at all. But the fact that I had a reference point to work with for creating weird visual or weird audio cues, or just moving the curve of energy along with the song, it was so much fun just to associate the music with something completely unrelated to that. And in the end, I really enjoyed the song as it came out. I think that was called Power Plant. I can't remember now.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, that's something that I eventually realized, because I was sitting down and thinking, like, man, I want to make more stuff. And why is it that I sit down on a Tuesday night and I can't think of anything, but I can sit down at the 2-hour album challenge and boom, 2 hours later have a song and not even really plan it out, and be like, why am I not doing that all the time? And one thing I realized is I need prompts. And instead of just going out in search of other people's prompts, I thought, let me look through my own stuff and see if I can find some things that would work as prompts because I wrote them, I emotionally resonate with it. I know what I mean. You know what I mean? So it's not like someone else just going, elephants, and you're like, oh, okay, great, I got to make a song about elephants. It's like you're actually invested in it because you've written those things.
Yeah. And I feel that having a time limit is also valuable too.
And so, now the songs that I've been writing have not been under a time limit, but the time limit does. So the time limit is cool too, as a project, conceit of, it's one of those things. Getting back to good enough. I mean, you give yourself 2 hours, and what you have at the end of 2 hours. Thank you, Saphira. I didn't even realize I said that, but that's hilarious. But by giving yourself 2 hours and saying, whatever I have at the end of this 2 hours is going to be what we put out, is kind of freeing in a way, because you just go, whatever comes out, and that's just the way it goes. And it also forces you to focus. It forces you to make really fast decisions. And you have to basically make a quick decision and stick with it, even if later on you're like, that wasn't the best decision, but or even while you're doing it, you're like, I'm not sure about this. It forces you to pick a direction and go, which is one of the things that often happens artistically, at least to me, it's really easy to become paralyzed.
Mhm.
And it's
Too
like,
many
oh,
options.
too many options. Where do I go from here? How do I, and I will say, even in my non-time limited things, I've learned now how to just kind of boldly go. And like, when I was putting Sunshine together, for instance, I didn't know what the melody was going to be. I had like 32 bars of like just chords. And I was like, this is going to be boring as hell for someone to listen to. And so literally I actually had gotten to the end of the arrangement and then went back and went, all right, I need a lead sound. And I just started looking through lead sounds. And then I started like adding stuff and like trying to write a lead and going, no, that kind of sucks. But the thing was, instead of stopping, I learned from doing the 2-hour challenges that I was just like, you know what? I can just push through this. Like, I don't have to stop and be like, I just can't figure this out, which is something I would have done in the past. Like, I just don't know where to go with this, and just stop and go play a game or do something else. I was like, you know what? I can just push through. And I did. And, and that was something that's new to me, is the idea of being able to, and that's something that the 2-hour album challenge gave me some confidence in, is I could just push through. Like, it doesn't have to be time limited, but it gave me that idea of, hey, you don't have to stop. If you just keep pushing, you'll find something and you'll go with it, and that's okay. And make a decision and go.
Yep. Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week, where if you do spend more than like 10 or 15 minutes on a problem, then try something else. Just like we were talking about pivoting, I think we were calling it. And it's just like, just take what you have and just try a completely different direction. Because if you spend 10 or 15 minutes on a problem, then you might not find the answer right away. And maybe you just need a just completely different change of scenery for that project. So yeah, it's like, even if it's not a strict time limit, just being like, hey, at the end of 2 hours, I want to have something, even if it might be like a 16-bar loop, or it might just be a sketch, but I just want to have something. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be a thing. Just having that time limit keeps you focused. And it's very hard to stay focused, especially when you're working on a computer that has so many distractions on it.
Yeah, I actually felt bad on Wednesday when I was working on Sunshine, because I like popped into your chat and said hi, and I was interacting for like the first 10 or 15 minutes, and then I was like, oh, I kind of want to launch Bitwig. So I launched Bitwig and I started working, and then like I completely disappeared off the face of the earth, and spent the next 6 hours working on Sunshine. And like, but I was like, oh, I really need to be on Ben's chat, and I was like, no, I really want to do this. So I kept. No, it was really.
Never feel bad about like doing that. I would rather people make things than hang out, because like it's not like me being all full of myself. It's like I want to inspire people to make things, but it's like I want to inspire people to make things. I think that it's really valuable to be. God, I don't want to sound like an asshole artist. But like just kind of a conduit for this kind of stuff, maybe, where I want to prove that it's not impossible to do any of this stuff, and it's not impossible to overcome mistakes, or it's definitely not impossible to get stuck and like bang your head against a wall for 30 minutes. It's like the main reason why I like doing what I do is because it shows every facet of the process, even if they're ugly.
Yeah, 100%. And that's that was the thing. And yeah, I guess I do find your stream inspiring in a way that I'm like, last couple of times I've watched your stream, I've either directly after the stream like started writing something, or like literally during the stream went like, I really want to be in the chat, but like I really want to create, and I want to create more than I want to be in the chat.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's super cool. And I'm like, I do want to see what you're doing, but I was like, man, you know what? I really want to do a thing. And so that's like where Sunshine came from. And then I think the one before that was My Own Little Cocoon is the other one that I think I wrote directly following your stream. And it was just like, your stream ended, and I was like, dude, I gotta get into Bitwig, and I just need to start messing around and come up with something. And that it's interesting, like even without a time limit, like how many of those skills apply from working with a time limit. Something else I wanted to talk about in terms of like project management is, how do you arrange your files? How do you and I don't mean specifically.
I know.
But some stuff to think about, like a good example is, and I kind of use it to this day, is Film Riot. I don't know if anybody here watches Film Riot on YouTube, but Ryan Connolly, he's got his little production company, Triune, and yes, actually we do name him that way, Mel, and that's the problem. Unfortunately, that's the thing, and one of the things that Ryan Connolly did one time, and I'll have to dig up the video. I'll see if I can put it in the show notes. There is one Film Riot where he literally goes through how he sets up a project on the disc. Like, I set, I create a folder for the project, and then I make these folders. And obviously he's talking about video projects, or film projects, but it's the same principle. And I use that. I don't use his method directly, but I use that so much. Just the skill that I learned from that of, like setting up your project in advance. So every project, especially if I make a video project now, there's always a folder called renders. There's always a folder called assets. Assets are where or there's a footage folder, and you put stuff you put your footage in the footage folder, you put your renders, your renders get rendered into the renders folder. And it's like all of a sudden my project is relatively organized, and it didn't take me forever.
Mr. Bill actually put out a video fairly recently about that as well, which I'm going to post in the show notes. But I'll also post in the chat. Where how he organizes his Ableton files and how he organizes like all of his stuff. He has a very meticulous setup for that, which actually he says it takes him quite a bit of time to maintain, but it's also very important too.
Something else I'm learning how to do is templates. One of the things I do for this show is I have a folder for each episode. And everything for the episode, the show notes, all that stuff goes in. The show notes go in there. The finished files go in there. The originals go in there. Like everything kind of goes in that folder, and those folders are all basically set up the same way. I have a show notes, essentially a show notes template that I use. I have a show format document that I'm using right now. That just literally has things written out like, welcome to the Mandatory Social Interaction Show. I'm your host, Eric. It's literally written right here on my screen. And you would think that's not the type of thing you need to write out. But you know what? Having it in front of you really helps. I've got a wrap up written out here so that I don't forget stuff. And it's funny how little stupid things like that are really helpful, but because while you're in the midst of doing a show like this that's live, there are things I don't want to forget to say. I don't want to forget to say that the background music is by Ben. I don't want to forget that our theme song is by Kevin Macleod. I don't want to forget to say like the show is available here, here, and here. All of those things are, you would think, things that you would just like think of off the cuff, but they're actually not. And it's something I learned when I was doing a radio show. It's like the more of this stuff you write out, the better off you are. The better off you kind of are and that's what I'm trying to say in terms of like project management. The more of that stuff that you do, the better off you are in the long run. And one of the cool ways I've heard this put is, past Eric needs to help future Eric. Right? Like I'm helping future Eric figure things out. I'm helping future Eric go back and say, oh, I need to redo something in this project, and I've got all the pieces. I know where all the pieces are. Like, one thing I do in Bitwig now is every project I do a collect and save. Why? Because I want all those samples in with that project, because I know I'm going to screw it up, and I know my samples folder is going to like disappear or move or something, and I'm not going to do it right. And then the next time I open a project, it won't work. You know, and there's a lot of things you need to, and it's interesting to me, it really resonated when I heard it put that way. Like, I need to help future Eric do this thing. Past Eric needs to help future Eric, or present Eric needs to help future Eric. Like, I really, really resonated with that, because it's like, oh, now I get it. Like, now, you know, now 2 days later or a week later, when I look at a project, I'm like, oh, everything's here. And I'm kind of grateful for past Eric. Instead of going, oh, man, I really should have. Instead of having that feeling of, oh, I really screwed myself, I have that feeling of like, oh, I really set myself up for success.
Yeah. And I did something recently with templates inside of Ableton, where I basically, Ableton allows you to, when you click File New, it basically loads a file that you preset beforehand. So I have like little buckets for leads and arpeggios and pads and bass and drums and all this other stuff. So I don't have to worry about organizing my stuff. It's just like, if I make a bass sound, I'll just dump it in the bass folder, and at least it's somewhat organized there. But yeah, you're basically just doing this stuff so you don't have to worry about it in the future. And as you know, chaos theory works, the more you let something sit, the worse it's going to get. So it's better to like nip something in the bud when it's easy to manage, and maybe put in that little extra effort in the early point, rather than being like, oh, now I have to rearrange all these files and it's going to take like 30 minutes. So it's definitely better to like work to fix something early on when your project is just starting out, than to try to rearrange something way later in the project. And I think M suggested that it's Code Artistic Ninja said that it's very similar with coding, that folder structure is important too, and just organizing all your code and your classes and everything is so valuable in that instance as well, just because that when that gets out of control, it's almost impossible to fix. So yeah, absolutely.
And like, one of the things Sophira, for instance, is talking about, you know, naming her songs Piano Thing or Smooth Chords or Transish.
That's just Deadmau5. That's what Deadmau5 stuff. Yeah.
I've entirely done that. I have done that so much. And I will say the thing that really helped me get away from that and give things better names is what I'm doing with the Trello board. And it has nothing to do with Trello, so if you're not into Trello, don't worry about it. But it was making those prompts, because before I save it, or before I close the file, I've looked at the Trello board, I've looked at my list of prompts and gone, what does this fit? And, you know, like Sunshine came from a prompt that was, the colors of the sunset are the same as the colors of the sunrise. And I was like, okay, that's long for a song name. I still like it as a phrase. I still think it's super cool. But I was like, you know, Sunshine kind of works, and that's how that song got its name, and that's how it got its whole direction. Was I was messing around with some chords and figured out, like, hey, I think this fits that prompt, and suddenly the song had a name. And the thing is, those names didn't happen while I was, and that's the important thing, the names did not happen while I was writing the song. The name happened before I was writing songs. I have a list essentially of song names, and now I'm looking at, well, which name fits, or which name do I want to write to? And by doing that, I've set myself up for success, because I'm saying, oh, you know what? This song just sounds like this. This song seems like it's about decades-old conversations, and it kind of has that thing. So that's why it's called that. You know, and all of a sudden you've set yourself up for not having a folder full of, you know, jazzy chords because that's, it's like jazz chords. Great. Which ones? And now you have to go through your entire folder full of stuff to go like, oh, which one was the one that I thought was cool a month ago? You can at least go through and go like, oh yeah, that's right. That thing was, like my feet are freaky. And it's like, oh, my feet are freaky is going to like totally stand out. And you're going to be like, even if that's not the final name of the song, it's at least going to give you some idea of what that thing is.
Yeah, and I do the same thing kind of with the 2-hour track challenge where the song is a little amorphous for the first 30 minutes or so until we come up with the song name. And once we lock in that name, it puts a lot of directions on the song, and it creates a lot of like where I want the song to go, where it's like the song a couple weeks ago was like push-up competition sudden death. It's like, well, that song can go in a very specific direction now. and it did, and it was a lot of fun, even if it turned out kind of dumb and weird. That's part of the point. And it's just having a song name or having a direction that you can assign to it, it can provide so much not consistency. I want to say coagulation to the idea, but that just sounds gross. So yeah, it can coalesce. It starts with C. So it coalesces the idea into something that's a lot more manageable, something that you can actually take and bring together into a functional story. And I think that music or writing or art or painting or anything is basically telling a story, even if it's a snapshot or a vista or like a big epic. You're trying to convey ideas and emotions in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I had the same problem with naming conventions. I have a folder like buried in two or three other folders called the black hole, where songs go in and they don't come out. And like there's a lot of songs in here called, let's see, there's one called Drum Butts. I don't know what that is. One called I'm Drunk, which must have been really old because I don't really drink. And there's like a bunch that is just like idea 1, idea 2, idea 3. It's like someday I might go through those and find a good idea, but there's no like defining characteristics to those ideas. So I don't really want to go back and waste my time. So yeah.
I'm sorry, Saphira. Yeah. I did not realize Nightbot was going to block your link. And that sucks. So I will. Are you in Ben's Discord? Can you toss it in the Discord, and I'll be happy to toss the link in there in the chat right now. Or maybe Ben can. I don't think I can. I can't. I don't think I can do the link, Ben, because of the way I have the video set up. But okay. if you can if she posts it in the Discord, I will totally post. Ben can totally post it in the chat. He's a mod. I'm a mod.
Well, I hope so.
And we'll. Sorry about that. I'm totally gonna fix that.
That's okay. Yeah, Saphira's you're a Twitter user, right? You can send it to me on Twitter too. But either way, like it's valuable to have like those naming conventions and to keep things organized. I think that's a really good topic to talk about.
Yeah, totally. So, well, funny enough, we spent a long time talking about creative problem solving today. So I think we've probably reached the social interaction quota for the week. I think we don't need to talk to anyone else now for the entire week.
God, I wish.
I'm just gonna sit. I'm 100% gonna sit at work and just be completely silent all week, even on meetings. It's gonna be amazing. So since we've reached the end here, Ben, where can people reach you on the interwebs?
You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Patreon, and YouTube at Ben_Burns. That's BURNES.
Cool.
That's about it.
You can find me at ZaxxusEMK on Twitter, twitch.tv/ZaxxusEMK, and youtube.com/EricKleinCreate. The show is available on Stitcher, Google Play, Intunes. We'll try that again. Google Play, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts are sold. Our website is mandatorysocial.com. You can go there and get all the previous episodes as well. The theme song is Protofunk by Kevin Macleod. He is at incompetech.com. The background music is by Ben Burns.
Yay.
He's at abstractionmusic.com. And that's going to do it for this week. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. Thank you, everyone in the chat. You've all been amazing today. We really appreciate it. And awesome. I think that's gonna end it for today. If you're in the chat, though, hang out a few minutes.
Yep.